Here at Jansing & Company, we have our company. A lot of experience on the table today. I'd like to bring in Jami Floyd, as well as Brett McGurk, and Amy Holmes and Jonathan Allen, who are joining us today. And Jami, let me start with you. You've been blogging on the very issue of the Constitution. So if indeed President Mubarak does step down, satisfying all of the protesters that are milling in the streets and have spent so many days there, is the Constitution strong enough to get them to the next place?
Well, look, they have a constitution in Egypt. It's been on the books, ratified by the people in 1971. But what we don't always understand here in the West is that a revolution does not necessarily lead you to democracy, and that a constitution is really just a bunch of words on a page, that it needs legitimacy, the legitimacy of the people to really mean anything. So what we've had here essentially is a regime change, but is there really going to be the regime that the people want? You're talking now about a coup. Those are the words we heard Richard use.
That's right.
Is that what the people envisioned? We now need leadership. We don't want necessarily to see a charismatic leader step into place. That could be dangerous, especially if that person is a military dictator. But we need leadership. We need a group of people to come together, the cooperation to establish the infrastructure that Egypt doesn't have. We have to remember that here in the United States, and we always try and see everything in terms of our own experience here in the United States, but that's not what they have in Egypt. We had decades of essentially constitutional development in the form of state constitutions in every state that fed into our own constitution here in the United States. They don't have that there.
Right.
So they may have to scrap that 1971 constitution and start all over in Egypt. And that's the very real question. What happens next? What is the regime that we're looking at? Will they, in fact, have democracy in Egypt, even with all that we've seen? How will the people respond to what is going to happen tonight?
Even though what you're saying is it has a stronger constitution than the United States, when you take a look at the letter of the law, we're also hearing that Egypt TV is reporting that they will be airing, again, the announcement made by President Mubarak that we have been hearing this morning within the last hour or so, that he will be coming forward to announce his resignation. And that's what we've been talking about, of course, in this breaking news within the last hours I was just mentioning. I will now go to Brett McGurk. You serve on the Council on Foreign Relations, also former staff member for the National Security Council. And you look at this question that's been posed out there by Jami, which is what is the next step? How do we get to a situation where it is both beneficial to Egyptians but also the United States?
Well, we were talking before, and I agree with Jami. This is regime change. We remember that phrase from Iraq. And what that means is you have a total transformation of the society.
You were just there.
I was, yes. But so you have the army here. The good news here, we don't know what's happening yet. The word coup draws all sorts of ramifications.
It does, right.
What's happening here is Mubarak has now been forced out. That's actually good. We've been looking for a way to get Mubarak out. Now, the army's saying we want to welcome the aspirations of the Egyptian people. If the army is willing to serve in an interim capacity to draw up the rules of the road under a new constitution, constitutional changes, electoral rules, that's good. You need that interim authority. If the army is coming in saying, we want to save the state and take charge, as happened in Iraq in, say, 1968 and led to Saddam Hussein, that's bad.
And what's bad is, and one of the concerns I brought up here, Brett, before we have to move on to Jonathan, is the concern about violence. Because when we hear the word coup, and we also understand that it's going to be led by the military, what might that be? Although what we're hearing from Richard Engel, it doesn't look that way from what he's hearing on the ground.
Yeah, I'm a little more sanguine because I think the army and the protesters here have been kind of arm in arm, which has been a good sign.
Yeah.
And the army had to secure the state. You need security. The problem in Iraq is the army collapsed. So you need someone to establish security. Then you have to draw up rules of the road. This is going to take 6 months, maybe a year, to get a new authority, legitimate authority in place, and it needs to have security, it needs to have legitimacy.
Right.
The army here might be doing the right thing. The word coup draws all sorts of ramifications. I wouldn't throw that around too much yet.
Right, and that's what we've been hearing so far, according to reports, as we look at this, Brett. Of course, the head of the military, Tantawi, they're working very closely with President Mubarak throughout the years. These are not new people. It's not a new relationship that we're talking about. Let's bring in Jonathan Allen from Politico. Is this the easy part?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I hate to say that it's the easy part because obviously this has been a tremendous, dramatic event in Egypt for all the people involved. You know, I think maybe when you're talking about a coup here, maybe you should talk about a soft coup.
Right.
This is not a situation where you have a military taking over by force. It doesn't bring up, banana republics in Latin America in the 70s. So I think what you've really got going on here is sort of the the best possible result, probably from the point of view of the protesters, probably from the point of view of Mubarak once he realized that he can't keep power, and probably from the point of view of the United States government as well. I think the worst case scenario for all of these players was violent clashes in the streets. I think the military was able to keep its legitimacy through this by not cracking down on the protesters and by not taking over power when it was clear that they could have done that by force at some point. So I think everyone here is acting pretty rationally.
And Jonathan Allen, you bring up a good point, because the crowds that we've been seeing are not of one group. They come from all classes, all backgrounds. We're not talking about those that are living in poverty. We're also talking about those who are the educated elite. We're talking about the middle class, all of those who feel that they have not had choice, had freedom, and they want to make a difference there. And Amy Holmes, the question to you is, as we look forward, what is the next step for the administration, and how do they handle what we are hearing today?
Well, what we understand is that the administration has been working behind the scenes, the vice president calling to try to smooth out this transition. But, Richard, I'd like to pull back and look at this in terms of this is a world historic event that we are witnessing, that the Egyptian protesters have been able to overthrow a 30-year dictator who is worth $70 billion, let's remember this, in 3 weeks. And I think that this is to the power of the social media. Much of this was organized on Facebook. And as we heard the Google executive tweeting, this was a slap in Tunisia that started in that market that spread to Egypt. And there are broader ramifications for the broader Mideast. I think there are a lot of Middle East leaders who are watching these events today getting very nervous about what this means in their own countries when their people can see that the Egyptians were able to accomplish this in 3 weeks with very little bloodshed and very little violence.
Amy Holmes, I need to break in very quickly here. We're hearing from Al Jazeera that the Egyptian TV building has been evacuated out of fear of being attacked by protesters. This as we watch what seems to be somewhat calm demonstrators at the moment, although we have seen some pictures of the demonstrators with fists in the air and chanting. According to Al Jazeera, again, the Egyptian TV building has been evacuated out of fear of being attacked by protesters. Amy Holmes with perspective about we really need to take a step back and look at what has happened in a mere 3 weeks, that which has been in power for close to 3 decades, 28 years. Thank you, Amy Holmes, Jonathan Allen, Jami Floyd. I appreciate it, as well as Brett McGurk, as we try to get perspective of what is happening. Live pictures at the moment in Cairo, Egypt. President Mubarak announcing he'll step down in just hours.